This is Chariot.
Yadenchia efi yeja nyankopon ho enam ne doba Yesu Kristo so ebre yanhwefo ende edue nso nyame nhyiraw so wajemre na wo hwen e wo Chariot TV dwumedi so sanda dan da no ye bonka ye no ye wo Twitter X so ye wo YouTube ye wo Facebook ene ye wo TikTok so nti bebi biara o tie nkefi no obetumi a like na subscribe na afi wetumi pay dwumedi no so ama wonu bi a onte nyankopon asemo sa kwan no so enam sayo so waboa yen ama dwumedi a ye di no etumpon na yetumi ede asempa no edu nipa nyina enchen enne ye ma akwa baba apologetic hour so na ye bi di ho nkomo ende no eya asem a ate tese na nipa bebre ejidi ese enokre o trosem so nanso ye behwe se sana twon ka ananya sana twon ka na asem be nkwa na meka ho asemi ye bekasa afa se so obi ebe yo kristoni a na ya gina nkwada ana bafukasem no ye kana enokre say once saved always saved ana can a Christian fall from grace o Christian betumi ahwease efenegide ho ana say so be o Christian na obe asafobade na chese ne nkwaje no esipi abibie ni ho abetumi amana hwease na yenua yensempakani yadofopa Jonathan Mensa bonso no beboan e o say yumedie mu nti meton sa frɛ yenua no na waba be kansa Rajo na
na po me we na say
nyame adoma ka ho ye ye hu apologies ka wa che kakra odu ho isi
the ho isi kakra bende
and me dan kasa mu na mo na wetimi ne yen ahwefo akasa
yo me da say me fa akonya is na mada ahwefo ase say dan da nyina omoje medie omoje brena ohwa apologetic ka me da wase say watun sa frɛ me say ene Asia or apologetic hour quick announcement before baby yebeko the issue and so on is that the 4th edition of the digital lectureship comes up on 1st to 10th of August na echegusa or sakwan so 1st to 10th of August yebe digital lectureship enti adofo ehwe ye no emomode nhye nso sa na omuntu ahwefo for other people go for na Kenya na so intimate subscribe to Chariot TV now block that section on their calendar send from the 1st to the 10th a bit me have a fruitful discussion and the topics are timely in the sense that adia nipapi na it's going on in congregations, questions are being asked the team have you not read from Matthew chapter 19 verse number 4 and the topics now center on our dear our jaye and our refufro to marriage, remarriage, and marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and varying topics. Any varying speakers na because I was city. As I say, and then yes, yeah, but and then yeah, kasa about once saved, always saved. Because we center it on some things. First of all, the historical background, and baby surgeon if free and church and free back, and yet historical background that's here and how it's being brought up. One more church, you beat me at a quite of fast churches I didn't see na aboa. Na yenso so yetima hwe Bible mo hu how a ebitimi a churches afo no amometimi agedi. So that concept of once saved always saved, well, we might attribute it to a man called John Calvin, but he's not the first person unya sadwene no ana unya adwene bi a this adwene ba. In fact, once saved always saved is part of a whole broad system. Your friend Calvinism, 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 that is it, Calvinism. But people they mean to mean kind of cheap because you will be doing the Calvin in church, we can point it that way. But it's not coming from Calvin itself. Calvin was heavily influenced. The was a man called Augustine. Augustine of Hippo. He was a theologian. He be a quadri Bible edition and a Bible edition. But Augustine, no. So we the background now. When Nasia, they do free bar. Free Nkofukubia. You're from Manichaeanism. Manichaeanism, just said. And my mentor no assistant as I go along. But no connected dots, no. Only part dream. Natural fashion and so. Manichaeanism funny and Kofua Umufri will be a friend money. Originating roughly from Mesopotamia area, and Oshasia Church said duality of things. Duality means that so a church said there is evil and there is good, and those two things, good is eternal and evil is also eternal. Eternality of those duality, good and evil, and there is a constant struggle between good and evil. So constantly, that idea only Gnostics enyankenten so meka Gnostics and kofon so a omugidi say nkwaje nam nimdie so na eba. So Gnostics from the word Gnosko means to know. The Gnostics and kofon omugije say nkwaje nam nimdie awo. So to get salvation you have to study to a certain level to get the salvation. Now almost churches say almost had that idea that good and evil are two things, and Gnostics were teaching that the two cannot exist together. In other words, we cannot have good and evil in something. Indeed, they said that spirit and flesh too are also two things and also so intimately existing. Into your flesh, which is totally evil, and your good, a spirit which is totally good. So Gnostics had that idea, and if you read John's epistles, Kakra, you realize that idea is laid in there. John tried to defend Christianity and refuting the concept of the Gnostics. So that is where Augustine grew up. I mean, kind of say is that Manichaeanism they were not in the Christendom. Normally, no, they were pagan people who were doing their own stuff in Mesopotamia. But that's where Augustine originated from. The teachings of this Manichaeanism was in his mind growing up and things like that. But he came to be converted to Catholicism. And in that era, it was not Roman Catholic Church as we know it, but they call it the Universal Church at that time, Catholicism, on that background. And he converted to that. He also studied, and he studied his way through things and became prominent in Catholicism, and he's regarded as such. In fact, so theologians in Catholic circles, you cannot take away Augustine from it because his work heavily influenced people. 5 things, and I make Augustine work on 5 points. Make Augustine work on. Say, be a bit me connected dot. Not ya narrowing it down to. Then the year first of all, Augustine said because at that time there was a concept. Augustine who came to accept that we are born sinners. We are born sinners. We are born without holy. We are born sinners like that. And Augustine started thinking about it that if that is the case, he was struggling in his mind with the concept of eternality of good and eternality of evil. And if we are born sinners, then what is our state? So he started thinking about, and the first thing that he came up with was that we have a pellucid or a pulverized, I should say, a pulverized whale. In other words, we have a corrupted whale. Indeed, your chain say, Adam, Nyankopon born no na ohwe Adam ohwe ase no. Na hwe ase na chi no ne passe. So there is nothing good will about Adam in again. And that will itself, he lost the will of choosing between what is good and what is right. That will is destroyed, is corrupted. So he started teaching that and started thinking about that almost free Adam as they don't have essentially what we call true free will. So they are not truly free. they are kind of tied in as a chiro bone ede konso bi a chire no ana bone mane ye de ye. You remember Romans chapter I think chapter 7 where Paul was saying that the person may good, that idea. So Augustine had that idea that Adam ye born no there, he was perfect, sinless, have good will, can choose properly, has a free will to do things what he want to do. Good can come out of him. But the moment he fall, or then what happened was that his will was destroyed. His will was pulverized, I should say. I don't know how it may. It was pulverized, and that occurs that and say all his descendants, when we move free Adam as they don't have a true will on their own. They are not free. Bone asuso on sasane. You look at a puppet. See, obia akwana or the strings actually abudia baby are all pull the strings. You know? So there's a puppet here that is pulling the dummy. No, now strings now. Then the puppet will be doing what doing the aquana person. You know. So that is how he started thinking about it. That is the idea. The second thing that he started teaching was that, well, if that is the case, then there has to be a particular salvific grace. In other words, and I'm saying we are too tired, we have lost the will to do what is good. We are always pulled by sin. Bonena actually inquire the you need a pet to choose something good in Tino. Then Yankopon has to set in with his grace, and he called that particular salvific grace. Yankopon has to show us his grace, pour his grace on us, and his grace has to do the work, and that we can't do it on our own. His grace has to do the work. So he started teaching that. That was the second thing that he started teaching. The third thing that he's pointed out in his teaching was that, you can see from Augustine's teaching, was that he taught corporate responsibility. In other words, are responsible for money, because he believed that Adam has sinned because of Adam's sin. So we were all in Adam. Adam at that time. So therefore all of us are responsible corporately for Adam Bonnie. So he started also teaching that corporate sin is also there. Then his fourth point was that, well, nature is immutable. In other words, you can't change nature. So we are all born with a nature that is corrupted, that we have lost our will, and as a result of that, we can't change that. We can't make any change on our own on that. The last thing that he taught was monogenism. Monogenism is that mono means one. Genism is coming from the word egos. Egos means work. So in other words, there has to be one being, which is God, through the Holy Spirit, who is doing work. So there can't be any good for man. And that was Augustine's view. So 5 things that Augustine it's related to the Eka, which I think they draw attention to. One was that he talked about our will being corrupted, is destroyed. Then he talked about salvation, grace that is coming from God, that has to come to us. That is particular salvific grace. Then he talked about the corporate responsibility. In other words, we are responsible for that. So you have the corporate responsibility. Then he also pointed out that nature is immutable. Then he also talked about one that has to do the work. Or monogenism. That is the idea. Mono means one, and genes is coming from egos in Greek, which has the idea of work. So that is how we situate Augustine in that context.
Okay, but I have a question here. I think it's fascinating, the discussion that we're having right now, because you share Manichaeism now come initially, and I say you are just running us through a bit of church history as you were going. what that means is for us as Christians today, just this short bit, 10, 15 minutes, as I say, it would nipa yɛbɛbɔ ɔmo asu aba asafo no mu.
Yeah.
It looks like this man had a certain belief, no certain belief system outside of the church. And now obey a Christian into Catholicism. Let's put it that way. Obey a Christian. And then he brings this idea into it. The actual repercussions have it. All the way to Augustine and to Christians today. I mean, billions of people have fallen prey to this particular. It was just an observation I wanted to place here.
Yeah, and it's a good observation. Yeah, it's a good observation in the sense that you see, I say, okay, in the book of First Timothy, chapter 5, chapter 3 rather, Abraham Okasa about elders and deacons and things. One of the things he pointed out was that the person has not to be a novice.
A novice, yeah.
Novice, of course, the Bible explains why he said that the snare of the devil. But in one sense, to the exchange says someone who is a novice has a background. So if you don't take care, he will carry his background from maybe I know one. So Pentecost or the Pentecost for I don't know, and you will come and bring them into the church, and it will cause much problem. Say okay, the churches we have not been doing well with some of these times. The person might be very active, or zeal, or energy, he wants to serve do the work of the church and things like that. You don't take time to really teach the person. Don't take time to really teach the person. Say the baggages that he has or the free denomination urban, we can be able to filter and change all those things. Say those baggage, and come back to Christianity and try to destroy the lost church. So a good observation, as you pointed out, and as an American, there is no you can't take Augustine's influence from the denominational world. Augustine's influence it permeates Catholicism, it permeates Protestant like Presbyterian, Lutheran, it permeates a lot of circles like that. In fact, it has had influence and it has troubled the church and the lost church for a lot of times because of how Augustine was. He was very brilliant and his influence spread across. So that is a bit of Augustine. And then Augustine's influence was heavily bought by John Calvin. When John Calvin also shown in the scene, in fact, history tells us that John Calvin was going to study law, but he chose the Bible and started studying Bible and studying Bible for himself. And he was his studies about Bible and religion was heavily influenced by Augustine. Augustine, your man or church, and influence shaped John Calvin so much that in 1536, John Calvin by the Institute of Christian Religion. The Institute of Christian at a very young age, roughly I think 23 or 26 thereof. I know they by a voluminous book which trying to discuss Christianity, systematic theology, and things like that. How and all those things packed in that voluminous book are Calvin out. And in our case, what we call Calvinism, Calvin and church, can be listed in an acronym called TULIP, 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 TULIP. And he brought that idea up and systematized the teachings, or she share in church like that. The T stands for total hereditary depravity. Like Augustine, a church, we are Adam born, we all share partakers of it. We all share that, and we are all responsible for that. And we share his nature, Adam fallen nature. He bears Adam's fallen nature. Calvin put by saying that we are born totally depraved, and he called it total hereditary depravity. In fact, so chief often a sign bonnie, and I say a bonnie or something, and Adam bonnie like that. Adam nana the bonnie for because of Adam. That is the idea. Total hereditary depravity. Depravity means that at the pen through mumba, that is, you are depraved at the pen through mumba. Hereditary means that it comes because you were born. And total means that there's nothing good about you. It's not like you are partially depraved or you are partly depraved. No. You are totally, fully depraved. And that is the T in the tulip. Total hereditary depravity, like that. So that was his first tenant. So person of friend was a first tenant or first point under his Institute of Religion, the church, and in church Calvinism. The first point is tulip, like that. The first point is total hereditary depravity. The next point is the U. The U is like Augustine, a church say there is a particular salvic grace, And also churches, I say, well, it's true. Because we are totally depraved, there's nothing that we can do. We can't do anything. We can't do anything good on our own. We are tied. And we are being pulled out by sin. So we can't do anything on our own. So we need God's grace. But Calvin added the idea that the grace that is coming from God is unconditional. Let's hold on right there. There's something that I failed to tell you about Augustine the time. During Augustine time, there was a British monk. Augustine was not a British. Augustine is from Africa here. But there was a British monk called Pelagius. Pelagius didn't like that idea. Newman Augustine Church and Pelagius didn't like it. So, in fact, Pelagius fought Augustine by trying to reply argument and things like that. There was a whole debate between Augustine and Pelagius. In fact, internet is not typo. The Augustine Pelagius controversy to pull out a whole lot of things. And in 418, prior to before Pope Moba, the Pope came around 600 thereof. Prior to those things, Catholicism developed into Catholic Church as we know it. Prior to that, 418, in the Council of Carthage, they declared that, well, Pelagius is a false teacher, is a heretic, and Augustine, what he is teaching was correct. So Pelagius was opposed to Augustine. Newman or church say we are born of, our will is pelvicized, and we don't have a particular salvic grace. There's a corporate responsibility, that our nature is immutable. There has to be a work from God that should. Pelagius was against all those things and was writing constantly against that. But sadly, they declared Pelagius was a false teacher and a heretic. And with that, Augustine got his way through the things. So Calvin was heavily influenced by that idea. So first point was total hereditary depravity. The next point was unconditional election. Unconditional election. Nyankopon the best selected. You see, Nyankopon have to pick you. So from Calvin's point, and I said from Calvin's lenses, maybe a Calvin tia or Casano, not doing say the idea is that Nyankopon bo nipa ubi a yewo ne ba wiase bia no. God is sitting somewhere and handpicking people. We will go heaven, we won't go heaven, we will go heaven, we won't go heaven, we will go heaven, we will go. So there's unconditional election. It doesn't depend on you. It doesn't depend on you. So that is the grace. That is unconditional election. That is the U. The L is limited atonement. In the name of unconditionally elected some people to be saved and elected some people to be lost. So Jesus didn't waste his quote unquote his blood on people that are deemed to be lost in hell. That is his idea. So he was teaching, or church said, no, I mean, Yankupon has selected some few people, some people for salvation, and he has selected some to be damned. So, that is the people he died for. So we call it limited atonement. That is what he called it, the L, limited atonement, like that. Then he also added to it I. So tulip is TULIP. The I means that irresistible grace. In other words, Yankupon adom no de manipano. you can't resist it. Nti Nyankopɔn you say what the nkwagye ebrewa. You might not even think about it. You might not want it. Upo umpo ubeje. Nti wo heaven ho no say upe so upe kwa say wo nko heaven. Say man say why dream say well me person me ne Nyankopɔn betina bia. I don't want to go to heaven. You can't resist that grace. Nyankopɔn be choose you. He selects you and he gives you his grace. You cannot resist it. It's unconditional. It's unconditional and it's irresistible. You can't resist it. So that brought up his fourth tenet, which is irresistible grace. And the last tenet, and the year that is where we are drawing into. And then in the year the last tenet was P. The P is perseverance of the saint. Inti womu a omanya nkwa no omobeko so nyankwa da the saints will persevere, perseverance of the saint. Inti womu omanya nkwa no they will continue to get omobeko so nyankwa sa kopem say Yesu Kristo ba, so they cannot fall. So that doctrine and church called as once saved always saved no. People call it perseverance of the saints and a Calvin friend no. People also call it impossibility of apostasy. Impossibility of apostasy. Like that. And people different ones see always see. So that is the idea. And then we just want to latch in and look at it. You see so that is the historical background where it's coming from.
I think a fascinating story here and a fascinating history concerning Augustine, the work of Augustine, and the work of Calvin. There are two things I can present as two small comments. Pelagius ne Jumano, Makana Kakra. And I mean, encourage Ashafuni say, be a war who at idea and all a regional on kind. Near P or Pelagius can no cray. Now, near me do also kind and no cray. Now, at the back, important, no. Say, Christopher, see, years we don't put ourselves in the tax at Taritarium. We should just aspire to be Christians. That is the biggest thing. If science or carving the human one, name many people who are in Yanko Points. Generally, it's most of you be not paying Yanko Points in Musia. Pelagius open Yanko Points in Musia. And so, Pelagius is be your kind because you're a church of Christ in me. Now, what can say once saved and you're always saved? That tag the amount of Pelagian. I heard you they'll just put a tag on you or you're Pelagian because Pelagian na will be a Pelagius na will be a standing up against Augustine at the time one. Now Augustine is anti China, but see a big Christopher Mapa, young Shani say, my tax. My tax no and share so the then because of more Calvinist in so there's some China crown or Pequimia as a Calvinism no cray. Inti won't say not optional. Inti I hear about Pebino.
And to comment before you bring up second point, you see, we should be careful with our allegiance to teachers.
Right.
That's the bedrock of it. You see, we are so committed to some preachers, teachers of things like that. Say, we don't look at their words and try and see that. Well, is it the Bible? If it's not the Bible, let's go. Let's throw it off. If it's Bible, well, it's Bible itself. It's not you. So when I can cry, it's not you. It's Bible itself. They don't look at it that way. We try to associate with teachers and people and ideas and couch it in doctrine form and try and put it under saying Obi can say me if you're guesting I say if you Pelagius I say I believe in Calvin, did you Calvin Dinian that day? I remember there was a guy I used to write a post and I'm sending some issue and I quoted this guy Charles Spurgeon and back to one of the famous Baptist preachers. I quoted him and I said that Charles Spurgeon, I mean, it's not even a title. It'd be a best standing out for you to get it. But I said that, I quoted him and said that this idea, he was wrong. I mean, one guy, Mr. Command was so furious. How can Charles Spurgeon be wrong?
Right.
I mean, and that is the idea. And sadly, it's not only in the denominational world that is suffering from that. We are also having our own bite of that. That in a church today, we are tied into preachers, we are tied into ideas, and we are tied in sometimes to schools. Or if school way, because school way, church way, school way. So we are fighting over things like that and not looking at the idea. Say, well, is it Bible? Bible, someone I say Bible today, but we are tied into those kind of ideas and those kind of schools and things like that. Sometimes it poses problems. So a good idea how they are training. So I fully support that.
Yeah, but and the second thing I wanted to talk about is we'll share this tulip principle from Calvin. Kamia koye say your yare bi. And make point to you. Yare bi wo ho. Ina yare na no edro. Ediso. So an intina maybe a question we think very possible see take a look at this particular point because it looks like total depravity, total hereditary depravity nature say me onipa da same. Me ni moral obia. I cannot do anything of my own.
Yeah.
So because I find myself in that situation, I say Yankopon ye baby. And that is the reason why say minti me nya hwede I say Yankopon elect me. I say Yankopon na ema me Jesus Christ moja no. I say Yankopon ne grace is irresistible because I'm already dead. So it's God's unconditional election, it's God's limited atonement, it's God's irresistible grace that is going to pull me, and it's God's Holy Spirit that is going to protect me. I mean, say you to me discuss total depravity no kakra na yenya monti ase na yetimi edi banke no a, then the rest automatically automatically falls apart because me totally depraved that all conditional election limited atonement irresistible grace and perseverance of the saints maybe some couple me kakra or total depravity.
We can talk on that total depravity. We can talk about that and to also point out among all the Calvin's tenants, TULIP, total depravity and the most well received among the denominational world. I even some now if we are among us that we are born sinners. We are born we are a sinner from birth. You are not a sinner because why you baby. But you are a sinner because you are born. I mean that is the idea that is coming from. So we have to look at that. We look at that, think about how it works and things like that. Then possibly we look closely at the subject of once saved, always saved. So Calvin taught that, and his point was that mankind fall from grace, and I say mankind fall from the perfection that God gave Adam. The Adam bonino. Then ubia free Adam ubia ye bon. We are all in Adam, and in that sense, we all share that corporate responsibility of the guilt of becoming sinners. That is one. Two, Adam it changed his nature, so he had a sinful nature, and that sinful nature was inherited by us all. That is the depravity they talk about. That sinful nature was inherited by us all. And in that regards, every born sinner. Good. Their key passage, which you will look at it because you want to understand what they are saying. Their key passage is from Psalm 51, verse 5. We look at that passage. But before we look at Psalm 51, verse 5, I just want to point out that you see the Amma Sadi will require big issue among denominations. Sometimes Bible translation am I a problem with that. So when you are studying these things with someone, a better Amma will say you pay attention also to the Bible translation that we are using. I don't know say NIV or what. I just want us to use NIV to show some of these things about say technician also here. If you can show NIV on the screen, then we can look at it. But I want to read NIV, Romans chapter 7.
What do you want exactly?
I want to show you how that idea of we have a sinful nature is shown in the NIV.
Okay, but the Bible verse, man, I mean, kind.
Romans chapter 7.
Romans 7.
Let's go to Romans chapter 7. Romans chapter 7, verse number Romans 7, verse number 1. Let's let me see. Verse number 5. No, verse number 5. That would be better. Verse number 5. Romans chapter 7. And to also point out, NIV, the current NIV we have is the 2011 NIV version. NIV has five versions. People don't know much. I mean, people think the NIV is in it. No, there are 5 revisions of the same text. So the last edition of the Bible was the 2011 one. In fact, they have another one. They call it today's NIV. Today's NIV. That is even gender neutral. Gender neutral. You bear money or buy any money instead of because our heavenly Father, our heavenly Father, because our heavenly parent. Yeah, to show some of these things. But you have NIV,
Okay.
You have NIV, Okay. This translation, I think this verse is different from the one I'm looking for. But yeah, read yours. Read you,
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. From when we were in the realm of the flesh, the simple passions aroused by the law were at work in us, so that we bore fruit for death.
Cool. Just read it. I think I have mine here. I have mine here, so that possibly maybe they know. It's in the make catch on. NIV has a lot of versions. So what was you? So one really here you might not see it. Good. My have it. Mine has the American. So this version here, let me read mine. Verse number 5, and say, For when we were controlled by sinful nature, the sinful passions arose by the law were at work in our bodies, so that we bore fruit for death. That is my NIV. This Bible here. You see, NIV and the Message, a para Bible, a very voluminous one. But let me see if I can show it to the screen, to the sense that the screen will capture. It can't. My camera can't capture. So, but that is the idea. That is the idea. Bible, no, actually. So, NIV here, the word there was flesh, but they have the idea that flesh is sinful. So instead of saying translating the flesh, they translated it sinful nature. But I think your version will have this text. Go to verse 8, chapter 8, Romans chapter 8, verse number 3.
Romans 8:3 say, For what the law was powerless to do because it was weakened by the flesh, God did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be a sin offering, and so he condemned sin in the flesh.
So your version is still using the word sinful flesh. Verse number 4.
In order that the righteous requirements of the law might be fully met in us, we do not live according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit.
Are you saying NIV and King James?
No, NIV.
Just go for 5.
Look at what is being shown on the screen as well. It's the same thing. So I think they maybe in the revised editions they
very revised. Okay, the your edition might be very revised.
Yeah.
Because my here does that damage. It does that. You see, verse number. I'm reading verse number 4. Say Romans chapter 8, verse number 3. Say, for what the law was powerless to do, in it was weakened by the sinful nature. That was the text. And of course, God did send his own Son in the likeness of sinful man to be a sin bearing. Verse number 4. So I say, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us, who do not live according to the sinful nature, but according to the Spirit. So the point that is the point I'm trying to draw and say, NIV started with that thinking that we are born with a sinful nature and things like that, and it has been carried through with people. So most people who read Bible, particularly sometimes versions like this, what I have here, NIV has several revisions. So what kind of you might not see it. It's not like sound. No, it's these words that are being changed. So they tamper with these words in there, and sometimes well, still now it's using the word flesh. I said comment one a verse 3 no, there is some sort of ROB question mark be sure they will show you, yes, they will sometimes show you that simple.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. He says in context like this, the Greek word for flesh, sarx, refers to simple stages of human beings.
Yeah, but how do you say that? It's flesh, it's not simple state. So sometimes that is how they translate it, but they have done well of taking some of these things from the newer rendition. But let's go to Yanko Psalms, Psalm 51. Psalm 51, verse number 5, where that has been their sugar stick passage. Our the church say we are born sinners. We are born for because of Adam Bonnie. And clearly, no, that is something that has been carried through for people. So Psalm 51, verse number 5.
Verse 5 will say, surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me.
So yeah, so that is NIV, you know. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time that my mother conceived me. Yeah, my main show other translation. Let's look like something like King James or New King James, so that we can better appreciate how it's going to say. NIV says, surely I was sinful at birth, and my sinful till the mother conceived me. But chapter 51, Psalm 51 chapter, Psalm 51 verse number 5 for one. Where NKJV, I think so. Was it, behold, I was brought forth in iniquity. You see, NIV was very emphatic. I was sinful at birth. That was not the idea. We say, behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. That is different from NIV no the honor here. See, so NIV the NIV is so clear. Our technician not try to give us a parallel passage. Saying a baby on the screen. Now I make it clear. Oh, like that. Oh, so with my name, say kakra kebeboa. Say na be good. I think this is better. Kase kakra bi ka ho. No, don't bother circling. Good, eh? So we can see what is happening. So from verse 5 for say, behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived. That is from the KJV or NIV, NKJV. I think it's NKJV. But so the other ones, NKJV, look the other one, no, NIV, no, I'll say, surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. So NIV is so emphatic, saying that, well, we are sinners, we are born sinners. If you are you are born sinners, like that. And that is pose problem for people. Having a good thinking about it, and it has created so many problems for people. So people think that, well, we are born sinners. But what does this say? David, that should be something that is worth us studying and trying to think about. Two things, and the say you tear first before we come here. First of all, so who's your Bible? Consider the nature of the book. Book tibia. I mean, Bible was written. I mean, of course, say, I mean, when you are reading literature, you have to consider the kind of literature you are reading. The way we study history book is different from the way we study poem. Psalms is part of what we call poetic messages. Psalm is part of what we call poetic messages. Psalm 51 is part of poetry. The way you study his history stuff and our books that are letters and things, like the way I would study epistles, and the same way you study the book of Psalms. Sometimes the poetry, or embrace figurative speech, or embrace language, rules of languages in your mabia, a one man in someone can that is something that first community, as I said, the moment you are studying from books like that, like Psalms, like Proverbs, like Ecclesiastes, like Songs of Solomon, books that have poetic nature, also careful how we build theology from things like that. That is the first thing. Two, I also say, see, the Hebrews had what we call parallelism. Parallelism, just say, or can't someone, then another also can't for, but they are parallel.
Or repeating the same message.
The same message. Some parallel, some parallel, they all kind of parallel. If you are not equitian, some they contradict, they are against each other, and some parallelism are saying the same thing. So what's the bit here? And I want to show you from Psalms now. Young Sam, maybe I can kind of. I think you can take it from the screen now, or I can show just one version on the screen. But let's read Psalm 51 and then go back. Psalm 51, yes, in verse number 1. Psalm 51, verse number 1.
Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies.
So now that I make sure you see, according to your loving kindness and according to your loving mercy, they are all the same thing. He's saying the same idea. So what's the message here? To also that
blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin.
He's saying the same thing. You can't some cry. No, I said repeat some corner with different words. So that is parallelism now. Make sure be just
For I acknowledge my transgressions and my
sin. So the first thing you should get it from verse number 3. So you see, David said, "I acknowledge my transgression, not my mother's. My transgression. And in fact, this psalm was written when David and Uriah Bathsheba acquired Bonnet. So what's the mutual open Kaiser Bonnet or
say no the bonus every day. David
David has some bump had none the bonus of book. I mean, who said Bathsheba Jaria instead of Nana Ebeko Kono or rest on the fee. And I will na bounce through who said Bathsheba Jari, who is a Bathsheba Jari, who know, yeah, one friend of mine, why you didn't know, and the boy, that's what's in welcome. I acknowledge my transgression and my sins are always before me. To ask that,
against you only have I sinned, and
so he's acknowledging that he has sinned. It's not like he's talking about his sin. Trust me.
And done this evil in your sight, that you may be found just when you speak and blameless when you judge.
Good. Trust me.
Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and my
sins. You know that? Because behold, I was brought forth. David is trying to point out the idea that Bonnie and why you see, and you don't know Bonnie will be why Bonnie, but he's trying to exemplify his Bonnie and why to show that the circumstance at which he was born was even wrong. He was not saying that he himself was born a sinner. The circumstance with which we were born. And okay, first line, I say, I was brought forth in iniquity. It's like, say we are on no honor. I say he has brought off out of wedlock. Out of wedlock. You see, wedlock near Bonnie. But doesn't mean that Akrano shares in his mother's wedlock. Young warrior no wako boy be mine. Ana wakra. But Akrano no the boyni. But me ye Bonnie. Inti awai me a woman cry, me ye Bonnie the woman. That is what he's saying. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity. To assume the next line.
And in sin my mother conceived me.
So the behold, I was brought forth in iniquity. No, it's the same idea. And in sin my mother conceived me. But he didn't say that I'm a sinner. I had to say, Fanny said, me Makobun Sanama bro. The Conum Sanama bro, and me share me back, and I may bomb as my bomb banasu. It is out of the control of alcohol and a Maya Sadden, but it doesn't mean that the bano and Mabana Sumo or non swabonsa. No. And I said, me both and I'm a diabomb banasum. I was angry. Out of anger, I slapped you. But out of anger, I slapped you. Doesn't mean that you too are angry. So what's the message? I say out of anger, and I'm a bow so. But it doesn't mean that me and me bow. What you bow on this one? Also, doesn't mean that. So David was saying that circumstance occurred. They won't know. The man no yeah bonny and or the one or the insane. You see, you get my point. Bonny moon or the insane. But it doesn't mean that or no you won't the bonny.
Okay.
That is the idea. But the NIV went wayward and mistranslate the idea and say that I was born a sinner, and I was sinner at birth. No, that is not the idea. And that doctrine has a lot of implications on it. That demand that it can be true. First of all, see a wakora, you 2-3 months. No, Accra state say. In fact, Augustine taught that Accra Otisano or Cobun Sam James direct. Accra had no power on his own. Accra be able to be within that time. No or call her straight away. And that's we count as that looked as God as some one Accra enemy. Only Accra because how would you Cobun Sam James on what count? On the count of say, you won't be baby.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, Kakra. I think when you have that argument, maybe it's something we can talk about sometime later.
Yeah.
But a more argument, and I say we have a sovereign God. That is the argument they put across.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that.
Question. That is the idea. So maybe it's something we can talk about some time later. But you can go ahead.
Yes, but the sovereign God, that's also tells us that sovereign God is a God of justice. You see, when you emphasize an attribute of God against the other, you get a wrong. You get a wrong view of God.
Yeah.
The God now, all powerful and does what He wants. It's a just God. It's a just God. So His justice and the people paying, and yet short of His sovereignty. Just that Calvin saw only the sovereignty of God at the expense of His justice. So God's sovereignty overrules everything. His sovereignty overrules every single thing associated with Him. So He does what He wants to do, and nobody questions Him. Even take from Accra Awonumpo. Take for instance Accra ni ma me nyinseno. Ni ma me so on nyinseno. Well, Bahame no akoyi Accra na. What will be the state of Accra? You see, what will be the state of Accra? Accra Nimpo didn't get the chance of coming on earth here. So Accra na ni ma me ankasa nyins eyi na gu. We yi na gu wa bottle no. What will be the state of Accra? Well, saying we want to go the sovereign God. That would have meant that God is not just. But Yankopon ye pepepe Nyankopon. Obi biara and the Bible make it abundant that Yankopon on pe or the boyeni say. Yankopon pese the boyeni be or the bonim. He doesn't want that. How can he say that pese will be or the bonim? On one hand, he doesn't care about Accra or Kono because he want the bonim Uncle Bunsamje. No. He doesn't want it that way. He didn't get a chance. Accra and get a chance of trying to access. And I said, one get a chance of growing up for God to save him, but he pass it off. And so that view cannot be right in the site.
So I would want you to wrap up on and then again share the arguments against. No,
yes.
Amuka total depravity no. Ebia yam boss our point in the tofa. Nyame adom na next week esan be bi mu a. Me ahwe Bible quotations a omugina so a omode kan ebia total depravity ebia omode ka perseverance of the saints no. Me ahwe me enyam ntiase ye nti na de yambo idea na tofa na
so to wrap it up and arrange it properly. This is what they are saying. They are saying that first Adam was created perfect.
Okay.
He had the will to do what is good and what is right and things like that. He was created perfect. The moment oye bonino ana olusu that perfect nature and that perfect nature that was lost no obia all na babia no it transferred through genetics sene ye wa kra bi also ye kokko it mama ye kokko bi no ye kokko sad that nature no Adam corrupted nature no and a fallen nature no all his descendants share that same nature into
Adam Sunibi
or Adam Sunibi.
Okay.
Exactly. Obi Obawuni bi or Adam Sunibi. You see, they had problem with Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ so he was born like Adam Masini in that sense because Mary no see Adam Masini. And they came up with the idea of immaculate conception. That when Mary conceived Jesus, so to cleanse Mary of his immutable original sin. That's what they call it, original sin. He has to cleanse him of all his original sin. And Jesus Christ, Mary didn't have any original sin with him to be able to transfer that to Jesus Christ.
Okay.
So that is how they get away with Jesus. Another thing that they struggle with John the Baptist. See, John the Baptist, the Bible says he was filled with Holy Spirit from his mother's womb. So how can you be filled with Holy Spirit when you are depraved from your mother's womb? You see the point? And they toss it up. But the point, that is the idea. I do not want to say we are all born sharing Adam's nature. And he shares Adam's nature. And in that regards, not just Adam's first nature, but his fallen nature. In that regard, we are sinners because we are born in this world. You carry original sin. That's what we call it. In their mind, we have two kinds of sin. Original sin, that you didn't particularly do it. No, but Adam did it, and representatively, we all share in it because we are born from Yahweh, and we have your own personal sins. So they have that two kind of idea, and that is the idea.
Okay, and the original sin, no, corporate sin, Augustine can once.
Yes, and that is the idea. That is where it's coming from. Corporate responsibility. Adam ye born in the Adam ye for.
Okay.
We share that nature because of that.
Then Mama say because we can say perseverance of the saints, no, and once saved, always saved, no.
Yes.
The button can be able to bonus of a crime, not yet.
So in their mind, perseverance of the saints means that say Nyankopon agye wo dia wa na o share that total depravity no Nyankopon enam ne ho nkonkon so abegye wo o gye wo you cannot lose your salvation. You are tied with God whether you like it or not. You are tied with God. So they always point out that if you are saved, you are always saved. Say who pointed out something about maybe this guy now Nyankwa, but they will tell you that the person was not actually saved.
Well, he wasn't saved in the first place. Okay.
He was a hypocrite. He was a hypocrite. He was just going around things. He was not actually saved. But if you are truly saved, they say if you are born again, then you cannot lose your salvation.
So if you are born again, you cannot be unborn. And yes, sir.
You cannot be unborn. Well, okay. That's in some sense, you cannot be unborn in that sense. But that is the idea that you cannot lose the salvation that has been given. And they have various ways of showing what they are talking about. I hope so you look at that and try and pinpoint these things and discuss what at length.
And then yenya ntiasie ewo wona woka safa one saved always saved ho ya hwe ne original sin ya hwe bebi asansusu ne eti by manikism mo na abrantie ana bema ye friend Augustine ebe che niam bebre emu na obema ye friend John Calvin na okọ law school ono so ede ne homa kese na ne papem ni nyina gina the so called tulip principle ono so ebaye tulip principle ne total depravity, unlimited unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance of the saints. So I never waiting action and then. Yami don't manage to keep on changing. You ever share Bible in your soa a year nipa or from home say Christopher no agent so nowadays Sanchez ama other saying na Yankopon Yadumwa, ye be Tian Kabium. Yankopon shine, nonsense in Kenya. Macramo. Bye bye.